always like to tell our call answerers, our analysts and stuff, that a call does not equal a call. So somebody who goes on scene for 15 minutes, it does not have the same value as somebody who is going on to a shooting scene, is on a shooting scene for 4 hours, right? The importance of the calls are both the exact same, but the quality and the context of the calls are going to be completely different. And that's something that we had to really figure out, was this call volume. If our day shift is taking 120 calls a month, how does that 120 calls translate to our midnight shift who's taking 170 calls?
Hey there, my name's Ashley Church.
And I'm Erin West.
We were once newly promoted crime scene and latent print supervisors on mutual struggle buses as we both simultaneously tried to navigate through the challenges within our forensic units.
Now we run a business where we create tools and resources that we wish we had had to make these transitions easier. We like to talk about the experiences we've had in the forensic field, the good, the bad, and the ugly, in the hopes to create awareness around these issues and move the needle forward to create positive change in the forensic community.
So if you're a forensic professional, regardless of your years of experience, who's not afraid to dive into real, raw, and sometimes uncomfortable topics, you're in the right place.
This is the Forensics Unfiltered podcast.
Well, hey there, welcome back. In case you missed the last couple of episodes, I just want to let you know we are in the middle of our exclusive Summit Countdown series, where we are revisiting some of our favorite interview-style presentations from last year's Summit, all to get you excited for what's coming this September, which is the Forensics on a Budget Summit. Hopefully you've been enjoying the series and are getting some good nuggets of wisdom from each guest. And today we've got Courtney Lozano joining us, who's going to show us how to crack the code with data. Whether you love stats or maybe you avoid them like the plague, this talk will change how you think about tracking stats to improve your team's performance. So, without further ado, let's get started. Before we start this episode, our guests would like to share a disclaimer that the opinions shared are their own and not representative of their current or past employment. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy. Hey guys, this is Ashley. Welcome back to the Forensic Supervisor Success Summit. We hope you have been having a great time with the first 2 days, and we're excited to keep diving into the topics for day 3. I think we have a lot of great content. So please make sure that you watch all of the presentations all the way through the summit. You're not going to want to miss some of these topics. And this is also a really great topic. Sometimes it's not the sexiest because we are going to be talking about stats. But we're here to talk today about using stats to optimize your team's performance. And I think there's going to be a lot of good ideas in this interview that we have with a special guest today that you probably haven't thought of on ways to use your stats in your forensic unit. So I'm very excited to be able to introduce to you someone very special. I've known her for a long time, Miss Courtney Lozano. So Courtney, if you could just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your background in forensics.
Hello, everybody. So my name is Courtney Lozano. Right now, I am a supervisor or interim manager with the Dallas Police Department. I've been here for 5 years. Previously, I worked at the Orange County Sheriff's Office. That's where I met Ashley. So I had the opportunity to train under her, had wonderful experiences. Since my time at Dallas, I'm an adjunct professor at one of the local universities as well. I teach 2 in-person classes and then a class online. I recently also started my PhD through the Oklahoma State University for the forensic science program there as well.
Oh, so you're very busy is what you're saying.
Yes, a little bit.
You thought, why not just add in a PhD on top of all of that?
Yeah, I was bored one day, so I just kept going.
So without further ado, let's just dive into the nitty gritty of all this stat stuff. First thing I want to address is, did you always keep good stats, or did something happen when you realized maybe this is something I do need to start implementing and it was kind of more of a reactive response?
So at the Dallas Police Department, we did not keep very many, detailed stats. The employees would turn in a monthly activity sheet. It was just a Excel spreadsheet that kind of documented the types of calls and then how many of those types of calls they answered each day. So the spreadsheet was all manually inputted. The only stats that we kind of generated was our violent crimes, which is what our analysts answered, then our property crimes, which is what our technicians answered. Other than that, we didn't really have any type of stat tallying unless you needed to do it manually. So we went through some chain of command changes. And at that time, they started asking about staffing numbers, call volumes, our peak times, peak days, and we just didn't have it available. I was unable to produce those. So I would have to go poll year or 2 years at a time, and I would have to hand tally the monthly activity sheets. So I would pull, 30 to 40 employees, hand tally, how many assaults they worked, how many homicides, how many follow-ups. It was very basic information, but obviously it caused an extensive amount of time on my side trying to hand sort, going through all of the different activity sheets.
Absolutely. And this is so common. There's a lot of forensic units out there that don't track stats at all, or if they do track stats, they really don't understand what they're tracking, why they're tracking it, and so much of it is all hand jamming. And that's kind of my experience at the beginning too. When I was at the Osceola County Sheriff's Office, we were hand tallying all the things, and if a technician forgot to put their manual tally marks into the spreadsheet for that month, it was hard for the supervisor to have accurate results. And again, if the chain of command asked a specific question, I either didn't have the answer for them at all because we weren't tracking that type of information, or it took me a while to go and hand tally everything as well. So definitely can relate to that experience. I'm sure there's plenty of other people that can relate to that as well. So when you started having this chain of command coming and asking you these questions, you didn't have the answers for them, or it took you a long time, where did you start on trying to improve the stats that you were tracking?
So initially, it was just kind of trying to figure out, okay, what is our immediate demand? One of the things that our unit was trying to go through was requesting new and additional staff. So the immediate demand was, okay, so we have 3 watches, we're 24-hour unit. So it was which watch needed staffing based on call volumes. And one thing that we immediately came aware of is that every supervisor was advocating for their own watch, which was great, but there was nothing to substantiate that claim. It was, well, we're really, really busy. We need the extra person, or we're down on people. Just give us that extra person. But there was not anything to validate those arguments. We didn't have anything. Even the monthly activity sheet did not have time of calls. The way our unit ran at the time was we had a period that nobody responded to a call during shift change. So even then, a call would hold for an hour, 2 hours. The next watch that picked it up would all of a sudden take that stat part of theirs. But, if you looked at staffing, we knew, well, that previous watch deserved the staffing numbers because they're the ones that are leaving calls holding for the next watch. So that was something that we immediately had to start looking at the breakdown of time. What type of calls are coming in and how long are they holding for this demand between the watches?
Yeah, and that's actually really great information. So you started with call types, call volumes, when you were getting called out, how long they were on the call for, and also potentially how long that call was pending.
Yes.
And once you started tracking this information, how did it help you and the forensic unit as a whole?
So we are in our 2nd month of doing this, and what we have already realized right away is that I always like to tell our call answerers, our analysts and stuff, that a call does not equal a call. So somebody who goes on scene for 15 minutes, it does not have the same value as somebody who is going on to a shooting scene, is on a shooting scene for 4 hours, right? The importance of the calls are both the exact same, but the quality and the context of the calls are going to be completely different. And that's something that we had to really figure out was this call volume. If our day shift is taking 120 calls a month, how does that 120 calls translate to our midnight shift who's taking 170 calls? So we automatically could kind of see that, our midnight shift is on calls for 2 to 3 hours at a time, Our day shift, they might have the longer calls, but for the most part, they are spending a little bit less time on scene. So therefore, you're already kind of looking at stats. You already have a larger volume at night. You have a more complex scene at night. And then you're kind of comparing that to the day shift. So that immediately kind of was an eye opener. In addition to, we started looking at the days of the week. We're looking at how our staffing is, and you think, okay, our Fridays and Saturdays are busier, but now we're looking at our stats and it's showing that our Mondays and Tuesdays. And it's because we're looking at our follow-up requests from detectives. So it's not even necessarily something that we're looking at the city for. We're also looking for our related units and how they're affecting our call volumes and the days of the week that's coming in on too.
And I know we have definitely heard something similar from our latent print units and our evidence units as well. So like latent print units, kind of the same thing. A case with just a couple of latents does not translate the same as like having one case with 100 latents. Same thing with like evidence intake. They have some cases where there's only a couple of items. They have some cases where maybe they have a few more items, but some of them are really large, or they have extra things that you need to do with them, right? So they're going to the lab, or they need processing and stuff like that. So there's extra steps that they're going through. So like you said, all cases are not created equal, and therefore you need that information in order to make the best informed decision of like, how are we going to use this information to justify more people on specific shifts. Same thing with like evidence intake too. So you talked about, I know in some agencies, like maybe their evidence units is not there, like they're on call, but they're not in the office like on the weekends. So naturally, Monday, the person that's intaking all of the evidence is going to have an influx of cases versus someone that's going to be intaking evidence later in the week.
Right.
So moving on, do you think that tracking stats or that type of data for your team is important? Because I know when we start talking about this can be very overwhelming. And this is something that supervisors tend to push to the back burner. So now that you have started this for a couple of months, do you think this is important for you and your team?
Yes. I think it's very easy for people to be very subjective about stats. I think it's great that people are trying to advocate for their watch, but I think when you start looking at the details of it and you don't have the support, the numbers to actually back up the stats that you're arguing, very few people are going to come and be on your side. So us trying to look at the stats and say, okay, these numbers are actually speaking for themselves. So you might want more people, but we're showing that based on our call volumes and our time of day, days of the week, that this is actually a demand. And therefore, not many people will argue with that. You're looking at facts and not somebody's emotional attachment to whatever it is that you're trying to argue one way or another.
Yeah, and I think it's important to also note that when you're asking for things like another person or equipment, like whatever, a lot of supervisors will just be like, oh, we really like, the people that are over your different shifts, like, oh, we're super busy. Everyone feels busy, right? Not trying to downplay it, but everyone feels busy. So when you're asking for more resources and more people, it's not enough just to say like, hey, I need this. You need that data and information to back it up. Otherwise, it should be no surprise to you when you feel like you don't get the support. You're always declined. The answer is always no from your chain of command. So do you think our supervisors that don't keep good stats that can actually tell you the information you need to know, right? Are they doing a disservice to their team? And if so,
yes.
In what ways is this a big disservice?
Hey, it's Ashley from Gap Science, and I had to hop on here and tell you something super important. I wanted to let all of our forensic friends know that we have something huge coming your way this September. But first, what we need to know is, do you currently feel stretched very thin? Feel like you don't have all the resources that you need, not just to do your job, but do your job well? Or like you're constantly being asked to do more with less? If this sounds like you, first, you are not alone. There are so many forensic units across the nation, worldwide, that are in the same boat. But most importantly, you are not out of options. We have created the Forensics on a Budget Summit just for you. This is a virtual event. You can think of it like a virtual conference, but better. made just for forensic professionals at law enforcement agencies on small or tight budgets. Now, this is not for forensic units that are fully equipped with all of the fancy equipment and have an ample amount of people on their team. We are talking specifically to those that are working with the bare minimum or maybe even less than that. You'll hear from over 20 experts over a span of 4 days, sharing real practical strategies to get the most out of your budget. Everything from creative funding options to training hacks to tools to advocate for your unit and systems you can actually implement even when the answer is usually no. If this sounds good to you, I want you to head to www.forensicsonabudget.com. That's forensicsonabudget.com. And if you're listening to this before registration opens in September, then you will be joining our VIP waitlist and you will be the first to know when the free tickets are available. And if you're listening to this and the registration is already live, don't wait. Grab your free ticket. Yes, I said free, and join us in September for this one-of-a-kind summit built just for you. We are so excited and can't wait to see you there.
Are supervisors that don't keep good stats that can actually tell you the information you need to know, right? Are they doing a disservice to their team? And if so,
Yes.
In what ways is this a big disservice?
Yes, so I think people are trying to keep stats initially. I think their whole goal initially is to try to track productivity of their employees. And I think that that's important to ensure that your employees are being fully utilized to whatever their job duties are. However, I think it's also very important that these stats are speaking for your unit. One thing that we've been trying to do is pay studies. We've been trying to increase our pay. We've been trying to get new positions. And we didn't have any of the stats. We're been asked, how much of their job is call answering versus report writing or evidence processing? What is the percent breakdown? And I might not be able to tell them how much time they're sitting in the office, but I will be able to tell them immediately, this is the amount of time on a regular basis that they're spent out in the office. This is the time, responding to calls. And you also then can kind of do some deductive reasoning. You have our evening watch where they might be responding at 5 p.m. to the northernest part of a city, right? They have a 45-minute drive and then they're on scene for an hour and they're coming back. So automatically they're gone for 3 hours. And so little things like that, I think, is very important for the chain of command, for anybody in the office, and also for their peers. I always hate to say that people deserve to be selfish when they're in the office because it directly affects them. So whether people agree with it or not, somebody deserves to say, hey, I think I'm pulling a little bit more weight than this person. And not that somebody's job duties necessarily need to be substantiated by somebody else, but you can say, okay, well, I'm looking at these stats, and according to these stats, think that maybe you should reevaluate your concerns or something, which is what we've had a lot of recently, is trying that kind of comparison of one person to another or one call. And that's what I always tell people is one call does not equal one call. And these stats are kind of proving that.
Absolutely. And I know stats definitely helps me diffuse some of those arguments or comparisons or concerns from employees, right? Because like you said, people tend to get into this comparison game and like, I'm pulling more weight. And there were times where that was actually valid, but there were other times where I'm like, actually, on average, you're taking less calls, or, maybe the other calls that the other people were taking were more substantial in some way and stuff like that. So that definitely helped me. Otherwise, like, how are you going to investigate that as a supervisor? How are you going to investigate those claims from your employees? How are you going to resolve conflict in other situations that involve stats and performance, right?
Right.
So how can tracking stats help increase the productivity of our teams based off of your experience?
So I think this kind of goes off of everything that we've been discussing, is that all of our stats are kind of feeding off of each other. So we're trying to determine how are we dividing our staff across all the 3 watches. This has directly resulted in us creating a new 410 schedule that has eliminated any type of downtime. So we don't have the lapse between shift changes. We're looking at the call volumes, and we're trying to determine, okay, if the 9 to 9:30 p.m. at night is a very heavy time, if we alter the shift change based on the number of people coming on, and we increase, our midnight to take on those extra calls. So our stats went into not just, okay, how are these calls being divided across, but now how are these going to directly affect any potential new shift changes, shift bids, and stuff like that moving forward.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're not just using stats to increase the individual productivity, right, of each employee,
Right.
but also the productivity of your team as a whole. I think it sounds like you're also using stats to identify any bottlenecks or maybe even like agency trends so that you can prepare, right? You're not always reactive. You can actually kind of predict like these are going to be the times or the days where we're going to have influx of requests coming in, not just calls, but other follow-up and stuff like that. So as a supervisor, you can actually strategize, like, how are we going to put the right people in place to prepare for this increase in requests and stuff like that, and keep our team productive and not have all of these bottlenecks too. Well, this has been really great. Is there any other like last minute tips or advice that you would give other supervisors that are wanting to do something similar that you guys are doing over in Dallas?
I guess my only recommendation or advice is it doesn't have to be anything fancy. We don't have a budget for this. We don't have any fancy systems. We have another supervisor who is actually very skilled in Excel, and she created this tracking system all on her own. So we don't have anything else. We're just doing this all, I guess, manually, but through some type of system that we can run these stats, that we can evaluate it. So I just recommend getting it started. It's not easy. It's time consuming to start it, but in the end is well worth the results of, being able to pull those stats at any time somebody asks and be able to substantiate and validate any of your arguments one way or another.
I think that's great advice. There are systems out there in place, fancy systems, but they also cost a lot of money. You guys just started with Excel. If Excel intimidates you, I encourage you to phone a friend. There's plenty of people in the forensic world that would be more than willing to help you out. But a lot of what we also have learned when we were building our stat sheets was through Google and YouTube. So like Courtney says, just get started. And I think it won't be as intimidating or overwhelming as you start learning how to implement these for you and your team. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you
Awesome.
taking
Thank
the
you.
time to be part of the Forensic Supervisor Success Summit. And of course, it's always good to see you.
Thank you so
we don't
much.
get to seeing each other as much since you've
I
moved
know.
out of Florida. And I moved out of Florida too. So
I know. All across the United States now.
well, if they want to reach out to you, maybe ask you questions or anything like that, how can they get in contact?
So my email is going to be Courtney, Courtney.Lozano, Lozano @dallaspolice.gov.
And we'll include that information below. And
Okay.
of course, they can reach out to you on Circle, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, thank you, Courtney. And hopefully you guys enjoy this presentation. And we will see you at the next one. Bye.
Awesome. Bye.
I don't know about you, but that session made stats feel way more approachable and even kind of exciting, right? Maybe just a little. There's a whole lineup of forensic leadership gold waiting for you inside of the vault, including all of the presentations from our past 2022, 2023, and 2024 summits. And you can dive in today for just $29. And remember, we are counting down to this year's Forensics on a Budget Summit. We only have a couple more episodes left in this series, which means September is fast approaching. So this is what I need you to do. After this episode is over, head to forensicsonabudget.com and grab your free ticket or hop on the VIP waitlist, depending on when you're listening to this. I put the link for you below so you don't even have to memorize the URL. Just click the link. It's super simple, and we'll kick things off with you shortly. Thank you so much for being here and listening to Forensics Unfiltered. If you liked this episode, would you do us a favor and leave a review letting us know specifically what you liked about this topic? It will only take a minute, but it will really help us plan future episodes so we can bring you more topics that you want to listen to. We'll be sure to provide any links from today's episode in our show notes on our website.
head to www.gapscience.com. Until next time, stay safe out there.